The emergency beacon sat in the corner of the maintenance bay, covered in dust and forgotten by time. Thomas Reed knelt beside it, his tools spread across the metal floor. He was a young man of 26 with calloused hands and tired eyes. He had never seen Earth. This distant world was all he knew. "Will it even work?" asked Governor Helen Wright from the doorway. She was a woman in her 60s with gray hair pulled back tight. Deep lines marked her face, carved there by years of impossible decisions. Thomas wiped sweat from his forehead. "The core is still good. I replaced the damaged circuits. It should broadcast." "Should," Helen repeated. She walked into the bay and stood over the old machine. "My father helped install this. 80 years ago when they first landed. Back when Earth still cared." New Haven Colony sprawled across the valley below them, home to 12,000 human souls. The buildings were a mix of original colony structures and newer additions built from local materials. Gardens fed them. Wells gave them water. Solar panels and fusion reactors provided power. They had survived alone for 40 years. 40 years since the last message from Earth. 40 years since the supply ships stopped coming. 40 years of silence. "The council voted," Thomas said quietly. 17-3. "We activated." Helen sighed. "Robert voted against it. He thinks we're inviting trouble." Robert Miller was their head of security, a former Earth soldier who had made the journey out when he was young. Now he was old and cautious. He remembered what dangers lurked in the dark between stars. "What trouble?" Thomas asked. "We're already alone. Already forgotten." "What's worse than that?" The door opened again. Dr. Emily Foster entered, carrying a data pad. She was in her 40s, practical and sharp-minded. She had been born on the journey to this world, delivered in the cramped medical bay of a colony ship. "I've programmed the message," Emily said. "Standard distress protocol. Colony identification. Request for contact. It'll broadcast on every frequency we know." "Every frequency the Krell know too," said a gruff voice behind her. Robert Miller filled the doorway with his broad frame. His hair was white but his eyes were still sharp. A scar ran down his left cheek from an accident in the early years. "The Krell are a myth," Emily said. "Stories the first colonists told to scare children." "Stories based on truth," Robert growled. "Earth detected alien signals before we lost contact. Hostile signals. What if we're not alone out here? What if something hears us that we don't want to meet?" Helen raised her hand. "The vote was clear, Robert. Our children deserve a chance at something better than this. If Earth is still out there, they need to know we survived." "And if something else is out there?" Robert asked. "Then we'll deal with it," Thomas said. He stood and faced the older man. "We've dealt with everything else. Crop failures. Reactor breakdowns. The plague 12 years ago. We're still here." Robert stared at him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "You weren't born yet during the plague. 2,000 people died. Your mother was one of them." Thomas felt the familiar ache in his chest. "I know. My father told me before he died too. That's why we need this. So their sacrifices meant something. So we're not just slowly dying on a forgotten rock." The room fell silent except for the hum of machinery. Helen placed her hand on the beacon. "Activate it." Thomas entered the final commands. The beacon hummed to life. Lights flickered across its surface, green and blue. A high-pitched tone filled the bay, then faded into frequencies beyond human hearing. "It's broadcasting," Emily confirmed, watching her data pad. "Signal strength is good. If anyone is listening within 50 light-years, they'll hear it." 50 light-years, Robert muttered. "That's a lot of empty space." "It's a start," Helen said. They stood together, watching the beacon pulse its message into the void. A desperate call from a forgotten colony. A plea for contact. For hope. For anything except endless silence. Thomas felt something stir in his chest. It might be foolish hope. It might be naive optimism. But for the first time in his life, he felt connected to something larger than New Haven's small valley. "How long until we know if anyone heard it?" he asked. Emily checked her calculations. "If someone responds immediately from the nearest known human outpost? 6 months minimum." 6 months, Helen repeated. She looked at each of them. "Then we wait. We keep living. We keep surviving. Just like we always have." They left the beacon broadcasting and returned to their daily lives. The farms needed tending. The reactors needed maintenance. Children needed teaching. Life continued in the colony that Earth had abandoned. But something had changed. The beacon pulsed steadily, sending humanity's oldest message into the darkness. "We are here. We survived. Please respond. 6 months passed. Then the sky caught fire. The alarm cut through the morning air like a knife. Thomas dropped his coffee and ran toward the command center. People poured from buildings, confused and frightened. Children cried. Dogs barked. The peaceful colony morning shattered into chaos. Helen was already at the command center when Thomas arrived. She stood before the main screen, her face pale. Robert stood beside her, his hand on his sidearm. "Tell me that's not what I think it is," Helen said quietly. Emily worked frantically at her console. "Unknown vessel. Massive. It just appeared at the edge of our system. The design is completely foreign. Nothing in our databases matches it." Thomas stared at the screen. The ship was enormous, easily 10 times larger than the colony ships that had brought their grandparents here. But it looked nothing like human design. The hull was covered in strange armor plating that seemed to shift and shimmer. Glowing lines ran across its surface in patterns that hurt to look at. "Is it responding to our hails?" Helen asked. "No," Emily said. "It's scanning us. I can detect the energy sweeps. It knows we're here." Robert grabbed the communications panel. "All security personnel report to Armory immediately. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill." "Wait," Thomas said. "Maybe they're friendly. Maybe it's a ship from Earth using new technology." "That's not human," Robert said flatly. "I've seen human ships. That's something else." The alien vessel began moving, closing the distance with impossible speed. Within an hour it hung in orbit above New Haven. Its shadow fell across the valley. Helen ordered the evacuation protocol. Families rushed toward the underground shelters built deep in the mountains. Parents carried children. The elderly moved as fast as their legs allowed. Decades of drills paid off as the colony emptied in organized waves. Thomas refused to go to the shelters. He ran to the old defense grid, a system installed in the early years but never used. His hands shook as he powered up weapons that hadn't fired in 50 years. Come on, he muttered, replacing burnt fuses and rerouting power. The targeting systems flickered to life, ancient but functional. Emily joined him. "I should be in the shelters." "So should I," Thomas said. "But if that thing attacks, someone needs to fight back." They watched the screens together. The alien ship launched a smaller craft. It descended through the atmosphere, trailing fire and strange purple exhaust. The craft was still huge, larger than any building in the colony. Robert's voice crackled over the radio. "All militia to the main gate. I repeat, all militia to the main gate." The alien craft landed 300 meters outside the colony walls. The ground shook. Dust rose in clouds. For a long moment nothing happened. The craft sat silent, its hull cooling with metallic pings and groans. Then a door opened. Thomas zoomed the cameras in. His breath caught in his throat. A single figure emerged. It wore armor unlike anything he had ever seen. The suit was sleek and powerful, covered in plates that seemed both metal and something else. Energy crackled across its surface. A helmet concealed the wearer's face completely. "One person," Emily whispered. "They sent one person? Or one soldier is all they need," Thomas said grimly. The figure began walking toward the colony. Each step was measured and confident. It carried no visible weapon, but the armor itself looked deadly. Small devices attached to the suit hummed with contained power. Robert stood at the gate with 20 militia members. They held outdated rifles, weapons designed for hunting local wildlife, not warfare. They looked pitifully small compared to the approaching figure. "Hold your fire," Robert commanded. His voice was steady despite the fear in his eyes. Helen stood on the wall above the gate. She had refused to hide. A leader stayed with her people. The armored figure stopped 50 meters away. For a long moment nothing happened. The colonists barely breathed. The wind carried dust between them and their visitor. Then the figure raised its hands slowly. The gesture seemed universal, non-threatening. The helmet began to retract. Sections folded back with mechanical precision. The face beneath became visible. Thomas couldn't believe what he saw. He leaned closer to his screen, certain his eyes were lying. The face was human. Scarred and weary, marked by battles Thomas couldn't imagine. But unmistakably human. A man perhaps 40 years old with hard eyes and gray touching his temples. "My name is Commander David Shaw," the man said. His voice carried across the open ground, amplified by his suit. "I'm from Earth. We received your beacon." The colony erupted in confused celebration. Some people cheered. Others wept. Robert kept his weapon raised, uncertain. David raised his hand for silence. The celebration died quickly. Something in his expression warned them. "I need to speak with your leader immediately," David said. "The Krell detected your beacon too. They're coming." "Who are the Krell?" Helen called down. David's face hardened into a grim mask. "The aliens who've been trying to exterminate humanity for 40 years. And their fleet will be here in 3 days." The council room filled quickly. Helen sat at the head of the table with Robert and Emily on either side. Thomas stood near the door with other colony leaders. Commander David Shaw stood before them all, his armor now retracted into a compact vest, revealing a simple military uniform underneath. "Earth never forgot you," David began. His voice was rough like gravel scraping metal. 40 years ago something came from deep space. The Krell. They attacked our outer colonies first. Destroyed them completely. No survivors. No mercy." He pulled a small device from his belt and projected images into the air. Burning worlds. Shattered stations. The wreckage of human civilization scattered across the stars. "We fought back," David continued. "But their technology was centuries ahead of ours. We were losing. Badly. Then we captured one of their ships. Studied it. Reverse-engineered everything we could." Emily leaned forward. "That's why your ship looks alien. You built it from their designs." "We had no choice," David said. "We've been at war ever since. Earth survived. Luna survived. Mars survived. But we lost half our colonies in the first 10 years. Helen felt cold spreading through her chest. "Why didn't you contact us? Send a warning?" "We tried," David said quietly. "But the Krell controlled the space between Earth and the outer colonies. Any ship we sent never made it through. We assumed you were already dead. All the distant colonies. Gone silent one by one." Robert slammed his fist on the table. "So you abandoned us." "We were fighting for survival ourselves," David shot back. "Every ship, every soldier, every weapon was needed just to hold the line. I'm sorry, but that's the truth." Thomas spoke from his position by the door. "Then why are you here now?" David turned to face him. 6 months ago we detected your beacon. It was weak but clear. We also detected Krell activity in this sector. They have listening posts scattered across the galaxy. They heard your signal too." The room went silent. "My ship, the Defiance, was conducting long-range patrols," David explained. "When Command picked up your beacon and the Krell response, they diverted us here. We've been fighting running battles for 2 weeks trying to reach you first." He pulled up another image. 3 massive ships, dark and angular, covered in weapons. "This is what's coming. A Krell hunter fleet. 3 warships. They're designed to find and destroy human settlements. They'll arrive in approximately 72 hours. Emily studied the projections. "How many Krell on each ship?" "Roughly 2,000 soldiers per ship. Plus support personnel and automated weapons systems. 6,000 against 12,000 colonists," Robert calculated. "We have numbers." David shook his head. "You have farmers and engineers. They have professional soldiers equipped with advanced weapons. My ship is damaged and I brought 200 Marines. Against 3 Krell warships we can't win a straight fight." "Then we evacuate," said one of the other council members. "You take as many as you can and run." "My ship's cargo holds can fit maybe 800 people," David said. "Cramped and dangerous but possible. The rest would have to stay behind." Helen looked around the room at her people. Her friends. Her family. Who decides who lives and who dies? Nobody answered. Thomas pushed forward. "What if we fight?" "You'll die," David said simply. "All of you. The Krell don't take prisoners. They don't negotiate. They exterminate human settlements completely. It's what they do." "Why?" Emily asked. "Why do they want us dead?" David shrugged. "We don't know. They never communicate. Never explain. They just kill. Some scientists think we're in their territory. Others think they see us as a threat. It doesn't matter. The result is the same." Robert stood and walked to the window. Outside, the colony continued its daily rhythm. People worked in gardens. Children played in the streets. It looked peaceful and innocent. "I've lived here for 60 years, Robert said quietly. "Helped build half these buildings with my own hands. Buried my wife in the cemetery on the hill. Watched my children grow up here." He turned back to face David. "I'm not leaving." Helen nodded slowly. "Neither am I." "You don't understand what you're facing," David insisted. "I've fought the Krell for 20 years. I've seen what they do. Entire colonies burned to ash. Every man, woman, and child killed. There's no glory in this. Only death." Then we die defending our home, Helen said firmly. Better than living knowing we abandoned it. Abandoned our people. Other council members voiced agreement. One by one they chose to stay and fight. David stared at them like they were insane. Then something changed in his expression. The hardness softened slightly. Perhaps he saw something he recognized. Something he thought humanity had lost during the long war. You're all fools, he said. But there was respect in his voice now. Probably, Thomas agreed. But we're fools with home field advantage. We know every cave, every tunnel, every inch of this valley. And we've got 3 days to prepare. David was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded once. Then we'd better get started. If we're going to do this, we do it smart. I'll teach you everything I know about fighting the Krell. And we'll teach you everything we know about surviving, Helen said. They shook hands across the table. Earth and colony. United again after 40 years. United against an enemy that wanted them dead. The war for New Haven had begun. The colony transformed in 3 days. David's Marines worked alongside colonists around the clock. Sleep became a luxury nobody could afford. Thomas led teams into the mining tunnels, rigging explosives at key structural points. Emily studied Krell biology from David's combat records, searching for any weakness. Robert drilled civilians in basic combat, turning farmers into soldiers. Hold it steady, David instructed an older woman named Margaret. She gripped the plasma rifle awkwardly. This isn't like your hunting weapon. It has almost no recoil, but the beam is deadly accurate. Aim for their cooling vents. Margaret nodded and fired at the target. The blue beam burned a hole through the metal plate. She smiled grimly. In the tunnels beneath the colony, Thomas worked by lamplight. The mining explosives were crude compared to military weapons, but there were tons of them. He wired charges along support beams, creating a network of destruction. If we collapse the main cavern, we can trap thousands of them underground, he explained to a marine demolitions expert. And kill anyone still fighting down there, the marine pointed out. I know, Thomas said quietly. But if it comes to that choice, we make it. Emily discovered something crucial on the second day. She showed David and Helen thermal images from his combat records. Look at their armor here, she pointed. The Krell run hot. Much hotter than humans. In extended combat they overheat. That's why they have these cooling vents along their backs. We knew about the vents, David said. That's why we aim for them. But look what happens in humid environments, Emily continued, pulling up footage from a jungle world. Their cooling systems struggle. They slow down. Make mistakes. Helen understood immediately. Our caves. The deep ones near the underground rivers. The humidity is nearly 100% down there. If we can lure them underground, their advantage decreases, Emily said. David studied the data. It's not much, but it's something. On the third day the Krell arrived. 3 massive warships descended from the sky like falling mountains. They hung above the valley, blotting out the sun. Their weapons ports opened like hungry mouths. The Defiance rose to meet them despite its damaged hull. David's second in command, a woman named Captain Lisa Morris, commanded the ship now. Her voice crackled over the radio. We'll keep them busy as long as we can. Make it count down there. The space battle began with brilliant flashes of light. Plasma beams and missiles crossed the darkness. The Defiance was outgunned and outnumbered, but it fought with desperate fury. Lisa targeted engines and weapon systems, darting between the larger Krell ships like a wounded bird fighting eagles. On the ground, drop pods began falling. They crashed into the valley floor in waves. Doors burst open and Krell soldiers emerged. They stood 8 feet tall in black armor, carrying weapons that hummed with deadly energy. They moved in perfect formation, expecting easy prey. Robert's militia opened fire from concealed positions. Plasma beams and old-fashioned bullets tore into the Krell advance. Several aliens fell, but more kept coming. Fall back to checkpoint 2, Robert ordered. Make them follow us. The colonists retreated in organized waves, firing as they moved. They led the Krell deeper into the valley toward the cave entrances. Thomas waited in the tunnels with 50 volunteers. They heard the battle approaching, heard the inhuman war cries of the Krell, heard the screams of dying colonists. Steady, he whispered. Wait for my signal. The first Krell entered the caves. Then more. Hundreds of them poured into the underground passages, chasing the fleeing humans. The humid air immediately affected them. Their movements became slightly slower. Their armor systems struggled to cool them. That's when Thomas's trap sprung. Explosives detonated in sequence. The cave ceiling collapsed in sections, cutting the Krell force in half. Tons of rock buried hundreds of aliens alive. The survivors found themselves trapped underground with angry colonists who knew every tunnel. Close quarters fighting erupted in the darkness. Plasma beams illuminated ancient stone. The Krell's size advantage meant nothing in tight spaces. Colonists ambushed them from side passages, disappeared into maintenance tunnels too small for the aliens to follow. Emily's discovery proved accurate. In the deep caves near the underground rivers, the Krell overheated badly. Their armor systems failed one by one. Colonists picked them off methodically. But the cost was terrible. Margaret died holding a tunnel entrance so others could escape. Young Peter, barely 18, sacrificed himself detonating charges that collapsed an entire section. Families that had lived together for generations were torn apart in minutes of brutal combat. Above ground, the battle was worse. One Krell warship broke through the Defiance's defense and began orbital bombardment. Buildings exploded. The eastern quarter of the colony vanished in fire. David led the Marine defense personally. His armor was scorched and dented, but he kept fighting, kept commanding, kept pushing forward. He personally killed the Krell commander leading the ground assault. In orbit, Lisa made her choice. The Defiance was dying, its hull breached in a dozen places, life support failing. She aimed her ship at the nearest Krell warship and pushed the engines to maximum. For humanity, she said simply. The collision lit up the sky like a new sun. Both ships exploded in a massive fireball. Debris rained down across the valley. The second Krell warship, damaged by the Defiance before its destruction, began targeting the colony for total bombardment. Thomas made the hardest decision of his life. He detonated the main charges. The entire central cave network collapsed. Thousands of Krell died instantly. But so did dozens of colonists still fighting underground. The explosion was so massive it shook the valley. The second Krell warship, already damaged, took debris strikes from the eruption. Its orbit destabilized. The ship crashed into the mountains 30 kilometers away. Only one Krell warship remained. It hung in the sky, weapons charged. The colonists below waited for the end. Then something unexpected happened. The Krell ship began retreating. It pulled back from orbit and jumped away, disappearing into faster-than-light travel. Silence fell across the valley. The battle was over. Humanity had won. But the victory tasted like ashes. Thomas opened his eyes to white ceiling tiles and the smell of antiseptic. His body felt like it was made of fire and broken glass. Bandages covered his arms and chest. A machine beeped steadily beside him, monitoring his heartbeat. Helen sat in a chair next to his bed. She looked older than he remembered, her face lined with fresh grief. But when she saw him awake, she smiled. "Welcome back," she said softly. "You've been asleep for 3 weeks." Thomas tried to speak, but his throat was too dry. Helen held a cup of water to his lips. He drank carefully. "Did we win?" he croaked. "We're still here," Helen answered. "That's winning enough." She told him everything. 800 colonists had died in the battle. 150 of David's Marines fell beside them. Commander David Shaw had died in the final assault, taking down a Krell war machine with nothing but determination and grenades. Captain Lisa Morris and everyone aboard the Defiance had sacrificed themselves to destroy a Krell warship. The colony's eastern quarter was destroyed. The cave systems had collapsed. 3,000 people were wounded. Food stores were damaged. The fusion reactor barely functioned. But they had survived. They had defeated a Krell hunter fleet. A forgotten colony 1,200 light-years from Earth had done what many established military bases could not. An Earth fleet arrived 5 days ago, Helen continued. A full battle group. 12 warships. Supply ships. Medical frigates. They couldn't believe what they found. Admiral James Parker visited Thomas in the medical center the next day. He was a tall man with iron-gray hair and medals covering his chest. He sat beside Thomas's bed and looked at him with something close to wonder. "What you people did here," the Admiral said slowly, "shouldn't have been possible. 3 Krell warships against a damaged cruiser and untrained civilians. The computers gave you a 2% chance of survival." "We didn't know the odds," Thomas said with a weak smile. "That might have helped," Parker admitted. "But I think it's more than that. You fought for your home. The Krell didn't understand that. They thought you'd run or surrender like other colonies have." He pulled out a data pad and showed Thomas a star map. Little lights blinked across it, hundreds of them. "These are human colonies," Parker explained. 4 years when the Krell attacked, people evacuated. Ran to safer systems. Abandoned their homes. We couldn't blame them. They wanted to live. The Admiral's expression changed, became something almost reverent. Then word spread about New Haven. A tiny colony that refused to run. That stood and fought against impossible odds. That one. He zoomed the map out. More lights appeared, different colors now. These colonies heard your story. They stopped running. They started fighting. Volunteers are signing up by the thousands. People want to defend their homes now. They have hope again. Thomas felt tears burning his eyes. We just wanted to survive. You did more than survive, Parker said. You reminded humanity what we're capable of. What we're fighting for. Over the following months, New Haven transformed again. This time into a military stronghold. Engineers from Earth helped rebuild. New weapons systems were installed. The caves were reinforced and turned into defensive positions instead of just mines. But more importantly, people came. Volunteers who heard the story and wanted to be part of it. Families who refused to abandon their colonies anymore. Soldiers who wanted to learn how untrained civilians had defeated professional Krell warriors. Emily became the head of xenobiology warfare research for the entire sector. Her discoveries about Krell weaknesses saved lives across human space. She worked tirelessly, driven by the memory of everyone they had lost. Robert trained the next generation of defenders. His militia tactics became required study at Earth military academies. The old soldier finally had a purpose again, teaching young people how to protect their homes. Thomas recovered slowly. The burns healed but left scars across his body. He didn't mind them. They reminded him of what mattered. He designed new weapons, combining colony ingenuity with Earth technology. His innovations were used across the fleet. Helen refused all offers to retire. She remained governor of New Haven, leading the rebuilding effort with the same determination she had shown in the battle. When Earth offered to relocate the colony to a safer world, she declined. This is our home, she said simply. We bled for it. We died for it. We're not leaving it. A monument was erected in the colony center. Tall and simple, made from local stone. Names covered its surface. David Shaw, Lisa Morris, Margaret, Peter. All 800 colonists who fell. All 150 Marines who died beside them. Thomas stood before it 1 year after the battle. New buildings rose around him. Children played in the streets again, though they played different games now. Games about brave defenders and defeated aliens. Helen joined him at the monument. Together they stood in silence, remembering. Do you think it was worth it? Thomas asked quietly. Helen considered the question carefully. She looked at the rebuilt colony. At the ships coming and going. At the volunteers training in the fields. At the children playing without fear. We thought no one would come, she said finally. We thought Earth had forgotten us. That we would die alone on this distant world, meaningless and unremembered. She placed her hand on the monument, feeling the carved names beneath her fingers. But we were wrong. When danger came from the sky, we didn't face it alone. David came. Lisa came. 150 Marines came to fight beside us. And when the battle was won, thousands more came. Earth came. Thomas nodded, understanding. The beacon they had activated in desperation had done more than call for help. It had reminded humanity of something essential. Something the long war had almost destroyed. Unity. Courage. The refusal to abandon each other, no matter the distance or danger. The message wasn't just our distress call, Thomas realized. It was the battle itself. What we proved here. That humanity doesn't abandon its own, Helen agreed. That we fight for our homes. That even the smallest colony matters. That together we can face anything. Above them ships crossed the sky. Earth and colony. Military and civilian. All working together now. All united in purpose. The war against the Krell continued across 1,000 worlds. But humanity was no longer losing. No longer running. No longer afraid. New Haven had sent a message to the stars. Not with words, but with blood and courage and unbreakable determination. The message was simple. Humanity stands together. And together humanity would never fall.